Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us over your lunch hour today for another one of our WESC webinars. My name is Lola Adibogan, and I am WESC Marketing and Admin Assistant. Today, we have Jocelyn Peltier-Huntley, Principal and Founder of Prairie Catalyst Consulting. If you have any questions for Jocelyn as we go through today's presentation, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A box, not the regular chat box. However, do feel free to use the regular chat box to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business. And as always, this webinar is being recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing. You'll receive an email tomorrow around this time with a link to the recording. With that, I'll now pass it over to you, Jocelyn, to now begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, Lola, and thank you to WESC for having me here today. So just want to confirm you can see my screen here?
Yes, yeah.
Perfect. So today we're going to talk about your EDI journey, and EDI means equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we'll talk about what those particular words mean as we get into the presentation here. So the reason why it's a journey is because there's not necessarily an end destination. This is a practice that something you'll need to work on and focus on kind of throughout your career and throughout your life. And we're going to talk about how it involves acknowledging your self-awareness of where you're at on this journey, a willingness to learn, and some courage to make mistakes along the way. And our world is a dynamic place. There's always things changing. We as individuals are changing throughout our lives as well. So that's why it's a journey. So today I'm going to talk to you first about my EDI journey and why I'm talking about this today. We'll go through some terms. Like I said, we'll talk about psychological safety in the workplace because and how this ties into EDI. And then I'll have some tools and some activities for you to go through so you can focus on your EDI journey too. So I really want you to walk away with some actions that you can take to advance along on your journey as well. And before we get started, I just want to do a land acknowledgement. So while we're all maybe we're connecting virtually and we're physically located in different places, I want to acknowledge that I am physically located on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis as I sit in my home office in Saskatoon. I also want to take a short moment of silence just to recognize the 215 children recently discovered in Kamloops and the multi-generational family that was killed this week in London, Ontario. So as heartbreaking as both these incidents are, these are important examples of the need to create a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive society in Canada. And we're going to talk about some ways we can do that today. So we'll just take a short moment of silence. Okay, so next I want to tell you about my EDI journey. So my background, I'm a professional mechanical engineer, and I spent many years working in the Canadian mining industry, mostly working at mine sites. And if you've had the chance to work in the mining industry, like me, you would probably notice there's not a lot of women there. Mining industry across Canada sits at about 16 to 18% women overall. I think we're a little bit lower here in Saskatchewan. The profession that I chose too, engineering, in my mechanical engineering class, there were 3 women and about 85 guys. So not a lot of women in engineering as well. So despite that though, maybe because of how I grew up being in a small town in Saskatchewan, I didn't experience a lot of inequity, I would say, growing up in a small town where a lot of people looked pretty similar to me, and there was kind of an even mix of men and women. And I noticed a little bit more coming into engineering, but I noticed it more so as I got into the workplace and looked around and really didn't see women there. So what I'm showing here is the inclusion growth curve, and it was originally published by Women in Mining in their National Action Plan. And so it has these different stages. So I would say for the first part of my career, I was kind of cycling at the bottom of this inclusion growth curve. So I was kind of in comply mode, maybe sometimes not aware of inequities happening around me. Sometimes little things would happen, little microaggression comments. A really common one is that somebody might swear in front of me, and then everyone in the group would turn and look at me, and that person would have to apologize for swearing. Not that I was asking them to, but they felt the need to, because I, as a woman, maybe couldn't hear those words. And so I would begin to see these inequities. Sometimes I would experience things where I thought I was getting some different treatment, but I thought if I could just work harder, I could kind of prove my worth, and some of these issues would disappear. So for the first part of my career, I was really cycling at the bottom, where I was comply, I'd beginning to notice something, maybe have to adapt how I was acting in order to stay fitting in. And then when I had children, and was working at a mine site about an hour outside of Saskatoon, I moved into a leadership role, and I was often then the only woman leader at the table too, and sometimes the only parent that had kids at home that didn't have a spouse at home taking care of them. And so noticed some differences there. When I really moved up to the realized stage was when I had a chance to work in an office that had close to 30% women. That's the most women I worked with throughout my career. And I started to notice things that they were experiencing or subject to, and recognized how those things had happened to me earlier in my career. And I really wanted to do something more to see changes. And also at the same time in my personal life, my dad was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. And it was clear that he wasn't going to have a lot of time left with us. And so I really wanted to do something to make a bigger impact compared to the work that I'd been doing previously. And so with that, I moved up to integrate. I decided to leave the mining industry to focus on doing a master's degree, looking at equity issues and really spending time with family. And so my research looked at the complex social problem of the gender gap in the mining industry primarily. And so from that, now I end up doing a bunch more public speaking and trying to help others with leading the way too. So just to explain these images here, early in my career, I was asked to get my photo taken at the workplace I was at. My husband, who's also a mechanical engineer, was working there too. They never asked to take his picture, so that maybe should have been a clue to me, but they wanted to take my picture and use it in promotional material, I guess, to show that there was diversity within the workplace, because I was a woman working there. And then this last photo is me emceeing the Women in Mining, Women in Nuclear Saskatchewan conference a couple of years ago. So part of what I do too is volunteer. And so that's one of the organizations that I put a lot of time into, is Women in Mining, Women in Nuclear. So this graphic I just wanted to touch on. I saw it in a conference last week and I thought it was really great. So it tries to capture some aspects of what might place people in more dominant roles, and what might, if you're in kind of the upper half of the curve, or in this graphic in areas, you might hold some power or privilege in certain spaces or places. And if you're on the bottom part of it, these might be areas where you might experience inequity. So one thing that was interesting to me as I was just preparing for this is I was kind of looking at the different places where I do hold power and privilege. Not that these were new to me, but interesting to see this in this graphic. And the one area where I experienced inequity, as I just talked about, was around gender, was around being a woman, which maybe some of you can relate to as well. And there may be other aspects of identity where you might experience discrimination, and this isn't an inclusive list. I guess there could be other areas as well, but I think it's important to recognize those areas where we do hold power and privilege, because it can give us a way to support others that maybe don't in different places and spaces, and especially in our businesses, and who our clients are, who our employees are, who our customers are. So what are ways that we can maybe use some of those areas where we do hold power and privilege to support others? The other thing that I'll just mention around this too is that we all have unconscious biases. So we all have some maybe reactions or thoughts that come into our head. Sometimes we can make judgments about people just by looking at them for short periods of time based on what they visually look like. And these are things that we develop because of our upbringing and how we're socialized. And so we all have these biases within us, and we can recognize our biases and maybe choose to make different actions around them. So we can choose to educate ourselves more around why we might have these biases and kind of question why those thoughts first come into your mind. And we can also choose this understanding to help become an ally for others. And allyship, I think, is important because it's a way that we can support other people. There's lots of people, as we mentioned just at the start of this presentation, that are in need of support, that are going through traumatic experiences right now, that could use support. And if we're in those positions of power privilege, we can maybe get that. So the other thing that I just want to mention here too, when we think about a topic such as racism, there was a good book that I read by Ibram X. Kennedy lately, and he describes this as a racist is one who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inactions or expressing a racist idea. And then an anti-racist would be at the opposite end of that, as one who is supporting anti-racist policies through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. So the idea around it, that the point that he's making is that there's these two sides and we can choose through our actions to be one or the other. We are not necessarily always one or the other, but in different moments we can choose to be one or the other, and that neutrality isn't really an option, that we need to be making some conscious decisions. So part of this EDI work is becoming more aware of those areas where we might have blind spots, becoming more aware of those areas where we might have power and privilege, and then working to help support others who don't, to try to level the playing field in a lot of areas and make improvements for our society. So with that, I'll tell you just a short bit about Prairie Catalyst. So I'm all about leading and inspiring positive change, and I offer a number of different services. So EDI being one of them, helping organizations to advance along their EDI journeys. And I'm very passionate about this work, and that's why I'm also doing a PhD focused around it, and also do volunteer work supporting EDI as well. So next we'll get into some terms. So I want to talk about psychological health and safety, partially because it's legislated here in Saskatchewan that as part of occupational health and safety, psychological health and safety is a component of that now. And it also has a close tie to inclusion and diversity. So psychological health is about this state of well-being where people can they're supported. They can realize their own abilities, they can cope with normal stresses of life, and they can work to be a fully contributing member of the community. And so when we have a psychologically safe environment, it's really, we don't have these threats of harm that someone might experience. So it's a safe place to be. It's a place where we have belonging and where we feel included. And so the EDI terms too, we want to talk about. So diversity is this measure of variety. And so we can use this to measure maybe demographics within an organization, within our client base, our customer base. And so some common demographics might be gender, race, physical ability, sexual orientation. So in a diverse environment, there's a rich variety of visible and invisible differences amongst individuals. And so we have a lot of diversity already within our society. So the question around this with your EDI journey is really asking the question around, do you have everyone present that's kind of showing that diverse reflection of our society in which you're working and living, and maybe who's missing. So equity is about a means of fairness according to one's respective needs. So it's not about giving people equal measure of treatment, but about people giving the support they need based on their individual requirements. So the idea here is that we want people to be supported to reach their full potential. So very similar to psychological health, that we want people to be successful. And inclusion is this acceptance and celebration of differences so that one may reach their full potential. It's this sense of belonging. And yes, we'll go on from there. So the question kind of asked when we're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion that is important is kind of what is visible? What are some of the blind spots, or what are those things that we already know that are out there? Sometimes we can see visible differences, and sometimes there's things that lie below the surface. And so what are the things that the messages that we're not hearing, the voices that we're not hearing from? What are maybe the blind spots that we might have? What are some of the behaviors that we're not aware of as well? So in terms of psychological health and safety at work, we can have safe environments where people are in a safe environment, people are engaged, they're innovative, they're focused, they're flexible, they're collaborative. So people are going to be at their best, they're going to have their highest energy, they're going to be their best contributors when they're in a psychologically safe environment. In an unsafe environment, though, people are going to be guarded. It's going to be emotionally taxing. Maybe they feel like they have to put armor on in order to be in that space or to interact in that environment, and that's stressful. This can result in higher leaves of absences, higher turnover. Maybe it means that customers or clients aren't coming back to see you because they don't feel that it's a place where they feel safe. So I put some QRL codes throughout my presentation. So to use those, just hold up your smartphone to the screen. And if you have it on camera mode, it will allow you to, you should see something pop up and it will allow you to go to the website. So WorkSafe Saskatchewan has some additional resources around psychological health and safety, if this is a topic you'd like to know more about. And I just wanted to talk a little bit too on this slide around some of the reasons why we need to be aware of it. So Catalyst Canada had done a study earlier this year looking at psychological health and safety of Indigenous people within the workplace. And they found that 6 out of 10 Indigenous people did not feel psychologically safe within a workplace. So that means they're in this unsafe category where they're feeling stressed, emotionally taxed, they're having to be guarded in order to be in those spaces, to be in the workplace. McKinsey also did some research showing that 1 in 4 people in the LGBTQ plus community are broadly not out at work. And for those that aren't out at work, they're more likely to be leaving their current employer or looking for other work. So it's important to be thinking about these things because June is Pride Month in Canada, and it's also National Indigenous History Month too. So there's lots of events and things going on, which I'll talk a little bit about later, of ways that you can increase some understanding around these areas and support these communities. So I wanted to talk about health and safety because of my background in engineering and working in the mining industry. Health and safety is really, really important. And so just as an example here, we talk about in engineering and in the mining industry about the health and safety triangle. And so this might not be applicable to all your businesses, but the next slide will be a little bit more. So the idea around the health and safety triangle is that we have these higher frequencies of occurrence that are lower risk. So we have these near miss things. So think of it as you're walking along and you kind of almost trip, but you catch yourself. And so that would be a near miss. You didn't get hurt, but maybe there was a cord on the ground that needed to be picked up and you recognize that and picked it up and then no one got hurt. And so in that same scenario, maybe you're walking along and you trip and you fall and you now need a Band-Aid. That would be a recordable injury. The next level of severity would be a lost time. So now you tripped and you fall and you sprained your ankle and you have to be on crutches and you maybe can't do your regular job, can't come into work. And then the worst case would be a fatality. So the idea with these is that we want to try to learn from events when they're at that near miss. So we want to learn from things when we're just almost tripped over that cord and picked it up and fix the situation rather than waiting for those more serious incidents to occur. So in my research that I did as part of my master's degree, this was a 2018 national survey that I did, focused on people who currently or formerly worked in the mining industry. And so I had 540 people respond and asked them a whole bunch of questions around health and safety and inclusion and diversity. And one of the last questions I asked was, tell me about a time when you witnessed or experienced discrimination and harassment in the workplace. And so discrimination and harassment, it's important that we learn from these incidents because we want to create inclusive work environments. We need to understand these things that are happening that aren't inclusive to everyone, that are impacting different groups of people. And so what I found through this question is that predominantly the group that's being impacted in the mining industry by discrimination harassment is women. So close to 90% of the people who told me a time when were women. And even though they only make up about 16% of the workforce. So I had categorized these different incidents as either being discrimination or harassment. And I found out of the over 200 stories that people told me, about half were discrimination, half were harassment. And there's not necessarily clear definitions on what these things are. So I made up my own. So I labeled discrimination as something that could affect anyone based on kind of how they identify. So going back to the thinking about diversity, you know, was it based kind of just as a gender issue or a race issue or sexual orientation? And then harassment would be something that could be more severe, more targeted at an individual, and could be repeating. So inappropriate pictures up in the lunchroom would be discrimination, and you know, actively sending someone inappropriate comments or something like that would be considered harassment. And so what I learned from this, it was a very common message reading through these over 200 stories around discrimination and harassment, that often nobody spoke up and then nothing changed and we didn't learn anything, and these events kind of continued. So in only about half of the incidents did somebody actually say they spoke up. And only less than a quarter of them was there actually a formal complaint made. So the formal complaint part's important because that's the opportunity when we have to record something to get some data and to learn from it and prevent that from happening again. So a lot of these incidents, people aren't speaking up. Only 17% of them did the person say that the inappropriate behavior stopped. And then it was just as common that the person who was at the receiving end of this discrimination or harassment would end up leaving the organization as it was that the harasser would have. So I wanted to touch on this because one thing that it's really raised for me is that in the mining industry, specifically, health and safety culture is really, really strong, and there's known and established processes for bringing up health and safety incident complaints and dealing with them. And so even though we have psychological health and safety now part of occupational health and safety, it's still not really being treated quite the same way. And there's just a potential that impacts that are happening to underrepresented groups within workplaces are not getting appropriately dealt with, and the systems are not supported to be transparent and clear for those being impacted, and are not supporting them to speak up too. So something to think about within your own organization is, do you have systems in place for people to be able to speak up? Do you have systems in place so people could maybe have multiple individuals that they could speak up to? So one other thing that I found in this question is that often a lot of the time, in about half the cases, the person who was the harasser was in a position of power over the person who was the receiver. So it's important that we have different avenues for people to be able to speak up and make complaints. And there's different organizations outside of our companies too that can help with that. So through my work with Women in Mining, Women in Nuclear Saskatchewan, we have connected with Enough already, who's another Saskatchewan-based organization, and they have supports and training in place to help both employers and employees deal with sexual harassment within the workplace, and training around it. So something else to maybe reach out to if you want to learn some more about this. So what I've learned, I guess, through kind of my EDI journey is this is a little bit of what you need to do to think about having an inclusive workplace. And it looks like a really short list, but there's a lot more that happens in behind this. So the first thing is really understanding your status quo. Understanding what are those blind spots? What are those areas where you have where you're not hearing the voices of everyone? What are those areas where you maybe have privilege or power? What are those areas where you're silencing people? So to really understand your existing culture, that's important before you can establish your EDI strategies and where you want to go with improving EDI within your organization or within maybe your broader community that you're working in. So understanding the status quo, this is going to be a data collection phase, really. So it's auditing your current systems and processes that you might already have. This can involve interviewing, focus groups, surveying employees, clients, or customers in order to understand where these problem areas are, where these challenges are, and also maybe to highlight some areas where you're already doing really great work, so that you can use that to help leverage areas where you need to make some changes too. So if you can look to see where your strengths are and where some challenges are, that's going to help you on your EDI journey and creating that psychologically health and safe, inclusive workplace that you would like to have. So the next step is establishing that common understanding and strategy with key stakeholders. And so maybe this is people within your own organization, depending on the size of your organization. Maybe you choose to form a equity, diversity, and inclusion committee that's going to help do some of this work to establish your strategy. So in the strategy development phase, you really want to unpack those challenges and opportunities and look towards what those solutions are going to be. And really it's around taking, if you have a long list of solutions, and prioritizing and setting some timelines and goals around that as well. So in the next stage, you would collaborate, integrate, and create these accountable solutions. So ensuring that there's transparent roles, responsibilities, and processes for incident reporting, if that's something that was flagged earlier on. Equip leaders with inclusive leadership skills so that they can walk the talk. So this is really important, depending on the size of your organization, that you want to make sure that your people leaders are supported so that they can help expand your EDI strategy. And so some skills that you might want inclusive leaders to have: you want people to be empathetic, they need to be vulnerable, they need to know where their strengths and weaknesses lie, areas where they need to improve. They need to be courageous, because there's potentially going to be some difficult conversations in this change process, in dealing, in advancing along in your EDI journey. It's not just easy conversations, or we maybe would have fixed all these problems already. We wouldn't be having issues around sexism or racism and those kind of things happening within our broader society. Listening is a really important skill here. So sometimes giving people the space to listen, and you've done some of that listening maybe in that first step, identifying the status quo, but as you get down into solution design, there's going to be more ideas that will come out too, and listening will be really important. And then accountability is also really important, developing solutions. Who is going to be responsible for what? How does that work? And how can those accountability maybe be tied to other performance aspects too? So some of the solutions might look like awareness training. So it might be a training for leaders. It also might be training for broader employee groups. How can you support employees to change the culture? Maybe this is through unconscious bias training, which helps to maybe bring about some level of awareness, but then what skills and behaviors do you want people to be portraying afterwards in your inclusive work environment? So maybe you need to equip people also with bystander awareness training. Maybe it's getting into making sure that everyone has a great understanding of history. So Indigenous history, knowing what terms to use to talk about the LGBTQ plus community, and different things like that. So it could be a broader training besides just unconscious bias, but also helping to fill in gaps maybe where there's been gaps in previous education. Also in the solution part, it could be looking at your physical space and symbols too. So just going back to my examples of working in the mining industry, really common because it was a male-dominated industry, that a lot of the terms and titles had man in them. A lot of the safety equipment was made for men. A lot of the physical equipment that you'd have to work with is made for men, and me being 5'2", doesn't always work for me to maybe be accessing those same things and wearing the men's extra large gloves or the extra large coveralls. So looking at things just as simple as bathrooms. If you have maybe public bathrooms, do you have gender neutral bathroom options? Do you really need to have a separate male and female bathroom? What about people who don't maybe identify with either one of those, or transitioning in between? Can you have a more inclusive bathroom space for them? And then lastly, in the feedback and monitoring stage, it's important to set back, because the idea with EDI is that it's a journey, it's a practice. You're not going to necessarily get it right on the first go round and then say we've dealt with it, we've solved all the world's problems there. So what are those feedback and monitoring that you need to incorporate so you can continue to learn and continue to make adjustments and continue to advance along on your EDI journey. And so that might look like, having ways for employees or customers or clients to raise complaints, to give feedback. Maybe it looks like an annual survey or an annual touch base where you can gather different information depending on the organization. So next, I wanted to give a couple minutes with the email that was sent out ahead of time. There was a handout included with it, and I believe it'll be available beside the recording afterwards too. So if you were able to see the handout, it looks like that EDI inclusion growth curve. And if you don't have it handy, that's okay. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I'll give you a few seconds to kind of think about your answers to them. So the first one, and you can use this as a tool here, don't feel like you have to circle things on it if there's other aspects of your identity that aren't captured on here, because it's not a fully inclusive list. I think you can write those down too, but think about how you identify. So myself, I'm a white settler, I'm female, I'm a mechanical engineer, I'm light-skinned, middle class. So those are some terms that I would use to kind of describe myself. I'm a caregiver, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, so a daughter. So think of some of those different hats that you might wear, different aspects of your identity that you might have. And then the second part of that, if you can capture some parts of your identity, is where might you hold privilege? And maybe where you hold privilege or power is going to shift in different settings. So, in my house, my kids are pretty good with listening to me, so I feel like I have some power there. But yet sometimes in some of my past experience in the workplace, I didn't feel like I had power. So, it's not always transferable where how we might have power isn't the same in different places and spaces. So think about it in terms of the context of your workplace, of your business. Where might you hold privilege? Think about maybe some of your key employees or clients. Where might they hold some privilege or power? And starting to kind of think of areas where you might not be hearing other voices, where you might not be hearing other opinions that might be different than yours. And thinking about areas where we have opportunities to grow and learn. So I'll just give you another 15 seconds here to write some ideas down around identity and around areas where you might have some privilege or power. Okay. So the next part of this is just coming back to this inclusion growth curve and thinking about where you are on your journey. And so on the handout, I have a few extra descriptions on here of these different stages. And so I'm just going to talk through those, and you might want to consider that where you're at with this might be different for different aspects of identity. So in terms of, I'm assuming that a lot of people listening in are potentially women. So maybe your understanding around gender is pretty high up on the list because you've been a woman maybe for a long period of time, your whole life, and you've had some experiences that way. But there might be other parts of your identity or aspects of your identity that you don't know as much about and you want to learn more about. So those are some areas of growth that you can have. So I'm a really big fan of Brené Brown. I don't know if any of you are too. And so one thing that she's often talking about is that EDI is really this process of learning and unlearning and relearning things. And so when we're working through our unconscious biases that we might have about others, that's really a big part of what it is kind of starting to understand that, okay, where did I get this idea? Where did this come from? And, what don't I know about it? And just trying to do some relearning around it. And Brené Brown's mantra is this: I'm not here to be right, I'm here to get it. I'm not here to be right, but I'm here to get it right. So it's about trying to be better and trying to grow and learn. It's not about necessarily being right the first time. And that's why that courage and vulnerability is so important, because you're not necessarily going to get it right the first time. So really, I want you to recognize where you're at, and you might sit at different places based on your identity and your experiences to date. So think about gender, think about understanding perspectives of Black people, of Indigenous people, people of color, different ethnic backgrounds, immigrants, settlers, sexual orientation, religion, ability, neurodiversity. So all these different aspects. What are some areas that you feel pretty comfortable about, maybe because it's already connected to your identity? What are some areas that you maybe would like to know more about, so you could be more supportive of your community and help support your business too? So as we're thinking about these things, I want to try to move people to becoming advocates where they can to help support others, in creating safe and inclusive businesses for people to be clients and customers, or for people to work. And also thinking about how you can be an ally. So there could be aspects of your identity that aren't necessarily linked to you, but areas where you might hold some privilege or power that you can be an ally for others that don't maybe have privilege or power in those areas. So when we're thinking about allyship, we want to be beware of performative allies. So we don't want to just have social media posts supporting different things, but really thinking about what actions you can take behind it too. So maybe these actions are going to be different depending on what stage you're at. So let's go through the stages next. So at this comply stage, you maybe need to look around at who's not included in your business, who's not included in your client list and your customer list. Does everyone kind of look like you, or are there people that maybe look different or have different aspects of identity than you? In the begin stage, you might have some people that are different from you, and think about how do people who are different than you experience your business. So starting to begin to look at it from different perspectives. In the adapt stage, this is really about recognizing human impact. So are there ways that your business might be negatively impacting others, thinking about your employees or customers or client base. And then at the realize stage this is kind of like the aha moment. The light bulb goes off. So maybe sometimes that's triggered by something like the events that happened in London, Ontario this week, or the announcement from Kamloops the other week. So sometimes it takes those things, or maybe it's a personal experience that you've had or witnessed someone having too. So what is this aha moment that's maybe happened around it that makes you realize that you want to do better in this space and learn more? And so this area is really around learning and self-reflection, and you can spend a bit of time here, and that's great. So at this realize stage, maybe you don't know what actions to take, but you know that there's charities or there's other groups that are supporting that cause for maybe a marginalized group that you realize that you would like to do better in that area and know more about. So making a donation is a good thing to do maybe at that realize stage. Some of the other stages, if you're in the comply, begin, adapt stage, maybe it's just starting to look around and just starting to notice who's there, who's not there. Maybe it's starting to do a bit of demographic work just to realize, okay, who is your community that you're serving, and then looking at your customer client base and realizing, okay, this is my community, this is my customer base, and do they match, or is there a group of people missing that you're maybe not serving? At the integrate stage, you could conduct an inclusion equity analysis of your business. Maybe it's developing that strategic plan, creating inclusive systems, policies, and spaces. So again, you could spend a lot of time working in this integrate stage as well. I like to think of the integrate stage as more internal looking. So internal to your business, what things are you doing to make changes happen that's going to benefit your business and your employees and clients and customers. In the lead the way stage, it's about starting to share your EDI journey with others, because there's a lot of power in us sharing what's worked, what hasn't, what areas are we improving on, what things are we still struggling with. And this is a way of creating some accountability too, and talking about these things with broader groups. And it's also a way that we can help amplify marginalized voices too. So if we think about ways that we can give other people a platform in order to allow them to share their stories and to describe their experiences, that can be really powerful as well. So what I would like you to do with this EDI journey is think about these different aspects and maybe pick 2 or 3 areas where you feel like you need to do some more growth and learning around, and set some actions around it. So setting actions, you want them to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So as an example, some areas where I've been doing some growth and learning this year, just I took a class earlier this year around Indigenous relationships and reconciliation at the university as part of my PhD. And I found it really interesting looking at a map of Saskatchewan and just looking at where the different reserves were and where I grew up, where my great-grandfather homesteaded, and just looking at how there was really no Indigenous communities around me and thinking like, why is it like that? Why aren't there more there? So that was something I really wanted to do some more learning around. So I set myself some specific goals, found a few books and different resources that I wanted to learn from, and set some timelines around that. So that's how I set my goals around that specific topic this year. I have actually quite a long list of books and podcasts and articles and things that I'm reading, but that's just one example for you. So to give you some other resources just to help make this a little bit easier. So we talked about that June is Pride Month, and it's also National Indigenous History Month. So again, with these QRL codes, you can hold your phone up on camera mode, and it will take you to these websites. So these are just a few examples depending on what community you're in. There's maybe other Pride activities going on too, but just wanted to highlight in two of the bigger cities when things are happening. So Queen City Pride is happening this week. Saskatoon Pride starts later this week and runs next week. If you're looking to do some more learning, Out Saskatoon and You Are Pride have some great resources and workshops and different things that you can read on their websites too, if this is an area you'd like to do some learning. One book that I read recently is called This Is How It Always Is, and it's about a transgender girl and just the story around her family and supporting her and all the decisions that they're having to make as she's growing up. So really good, well-written book if that's something that interests you. In terms of National Indigenous History Month, I've been doing a lot of learning in this area, as I was saying, the last few months. So a really accessible book that's got some good humor in it is Indigenous Rights by Chelsea Vowel, and she's a Métis woman from Alberta. And she does a really good job of just capturing kind of a lot of the history in short little pieces from different aspects of Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit culture in Canada. If you're looking to watch a film rather than read a book, I would recommend you go check out We Will Stand Up by Tasha Hubbard, and it captures the Colton Bushy the case, and a really well done documentary, and captures some of the continuing struggles around racism that we still have in Saskatchewan. And then one that I've just finished reading last week was called Clearing the Prairies, Clearing the Plains, sorry. And it does a really good job of talking about all of the history, I would say going back to the 1700s up until kind of the early 1900s. So it filled in a lot of gap in history that I definitely did not learn growing up in Saskatchewan through my elementary, high school, and university education. So it does a really great job of explaining a lot of the very positive aspects of Indigenous culture that were going on prior to contact and early in contact, and then the struggles that started as the bison herds were disappearing on the prairies, and decisions that were made after that. So it would be another great book to check out. So that is all I have today. I would love to hear your questions, and if you need help on your EDI journey, please connect with me. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, reach out to me by email or through my website, and I'm happy to help you with leading your next EDI change and strategy within your organization. So I'll stop sharing here and just come over to the screen.
Well, thank you so much, Jocelyn, for that wonderful presentation. It was very informative, and I feel like I know a lot more now. We'll just wait and see if we get any questions. And if not, I can end the webinar early as well. So give everyone a little bit of an opportunity to ask any questions if they have any.
Yeah, and if they pop into your head later on, because sometimes this stuff takes a while to kind of soak in. So please feel free to reach out to me later on too.
okey-doke. Yeah, I don't think we might have lots of questions for today, but kind of want to introduce our webinars for the month of June. We have a webinar 2 weeks from now, and then we also have our Business Growth Luncheon on June 30th. Registration is now open for all of them, so if you all wish to attend more webinars, please go. I think we got one question. Do you see it on your screen?
Yes, I do. Okay, so from Derek, in your industrial career, when you faced discrimination, what was the most supportive thing someone did or could have done to help you? I think that one of the most supportive things is just acknowledgement that it did happen. Sometimes that's kind of tough when you go talk to someone about it and you don't even really know, especially when you're one of the only people like you in your work environment. Something happens and it's like, do they just not like me as a person, or is it because of, you know, some aspect of my identity? And people are not always clear if they're being sexist or racist or whatever else, you know, in how they're treating you. It's not always that overt. So sometimes it's just someone acknowledging it and believing it and wanting to support you in it. I think that's something that's really powerful. I would say that wasn't always the case, though. You know, that's kind of what inspired me to do this work, I guess, is that it's when things weren't acknowledged and when things weren't supported, and you kind of felt like things were just being swept under the rug, or when you don't feel like there's going to be any changes coming out of speaking up. That's when it's really tricky. And that's something that I saw a lot in my research too, is that, you know, that's the reason why people choose not to speak up, because they don't think that there's going to be a positive outcome out of it. So, and that's really sad, because in terms of health and safety within the mining industry, if there's even a hint that something might be unsafe, work is stopped, things are made safe, the problem is fixed now. But if something's maybe impacting your psychological health and safety, your mental health, because of something that was said or done, that can go on for a longer period of time, and it doesn't seem to really get addressed as much. So I think that's something that we can all do to support others, is just validate that their experience and support them in trying to get to a resolution. So thanks for the question.
Wonderfully answered. Thank you. Oh, there's another question.
So as a leader, what's the best thing you can do to let your team know you're serious about enforcing an EDI strategy? I think it's that enforcing it, it's walking the talk, it's doing it in everything you do, and not just relegating EDI to a corner of what you do, but it really needs to be integrated throughout an organization and in every aspect of it. So trying to bring it up and normalize it and talk about it as much as possible is one way to do it. That's one thing I found in my research, is that it's not very normalized, at least a couple of years ago in the mining industry, but normalizing it, talking about it is important. Trying to looking for areas where you have strong culture and positives, and trying to tie EDI into that. So, you know, if you're already doing something great in one area, if you're proud of work that you're doing to support the community in some area, try to highlight and tie how that's tied into EDI work already, that you're doing this to support the community because you believe in inclusion and you want to see diversity, and you're trying to fix some inequities. So try to reiterate as much as possible, I guess, how that's tied into your EDI strategy.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I think that is all for today. As Jocelyn said, if you guys do have any, no, there's more questions.
All right, this is from Barb. She says, thanks so much, Jocelyn. Another book that helped me learn a lot about farming on the prairies is Lost Harvest, Prairie, Indian Reserve Farmers and Government Policy by Sarah Carter. It's an older book, but historical information remains the same. Yeah, that sounds great. There was a bit in Clearing the Plains too, talking about you know, some of the treaty obligations were around, or requests and obligations were around shifting Indigenous people who were recognizing that bison were disappearing to farming practices. But then when that was being successful, all these roadblocks were put in place to not actually have it be successful. So thank you. I would like to check out that book as well.
And I can add that book to the link that will be going out tomorrow with the recording of the webinar. With that, I think that's all our questions. I want to say thank you again, Jocelyn, so much for this presentation. And thank you to everyone in attendance for joining us. We hope to see you at another WESC webinar, and have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.